Alright, today we're going to be taking a look at the Powkiddy A19, aka Retro Game Handheld, aka a bunch of other different names. Several different companies are manufacturing this product. There's a lot of people actually selling the prototype version of this that actually doesn't have the directional pad, it just has a circle, so you can see some early samples of this still being sold out there on the market. Definitely avoid those. You definitely want the updated version with the D-pad, I assure you. But this is essentially a Pandora's box in a handheld form. Game Boy style, so it's got the vertical orientation as opposed to your typical landscape orientation for most handhelds. So if you're not a fan of the vertical orientation, this is not for you, but is definitely set up for arcade style gameplay and form factor. We have the 6 action buttons on the front. We have the directional D-pad as well as the analog joystick, and we also have a home, a select, and a start button. We have one single speaker here on the bottom right hand corner. Would have preferred 2 speakers obviously, but at this price point you really can't argue because this is arguably the most powerful handheld device on the market, sub $100. So you gotta give credit where credit's due. On the side we have the power button with the LED light up indicator, so green for good battery life. Nothing on the back, just blank design. On the side, we have our volume up and down toggle switch. On the bottom, absolutely nothing. And then on the top, we have our various ports. So we have our micro USB charging port. We have our micro SD card expansion slot. This one actually came with a 32 gigabyte SD card, preloaded, has I think almost 3,000 games built in. We have our 3.5mm headphone jack, and then we have this tiny HDMI out port. So you'll definitely need an adapter to utilize this HDMI out port because this is not your standard HDMI connection, obviously. But overall, like I said, 3,000 or some odd games preloaded on this, can't go wrong there. And you also have access to Wi-Fi and a Wi-Fi store to download more games if you wish to play others and add additional ones to this already expansive lineup. Navigating the games is very easy, very simple to do. As you can see, we get a little preview window of the game on the right side there. You're just gonna go up and down, selecting the game you want. You can hit left and right and go through pages to get through it quicker. And you can also hit the start button to bring up a little mini keyboard and actually search individual titles. So say we wanted to play WrestleFest or see if WrestleFest is on here. Well, we're just going to type in WWF and it looks like bada bing, there it is. WrestleFest, WF Superstars, a couple other wrestling games. So we would just pick it and go ahead and play it. Back out. So you got your recent games you've played, category, breaks it down by different consoles. So we got Dreamcast, we got Final Burn Alpha emulator, we got MAME of course, PSP, PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64, Famicom, Super Famicom, SNES for us American audience, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Sega Mega Drive, and then the TurboGrafx. So lots of support for lots of different arcade and consoles. Very powerful device. Like I said, it can play PlayStation Portable, and Nintendo 64, Dreamcast. Has tons of games preloaded. I have found some of these PSP games to have a few hiccups, but overall everything is performing admirably. Nintendo 64 has been great. Only downsides you'll run into is game configuration. So a lot of these games, as you can tell, this is not an ideal button setup. We got the 6 action buttons. There's no shoulder buttons on the back or anything like that, so you're missing out on your shoulder buttons. So any game that has an extensive use of all the action buttons and shoulder buttons that you would normally play on like a PlayStation Portable, you're going to struggle to play enjoyably on this just because of the limited button layout. However, again, performance is great, and I gotta say, for less than $100, this is probably going to be the top handheld of 2020. Don't know any other way to describe it. I mean, you got Marvel vs. Capcom, you got PlayStation, you got all sorts of powerful games you can play on here, plus the ability to add more games and make some changes. So you're going to hold down this home screen, It's going to bring up your menu option, and you can do all sorts of different things. So you can change the key configuration, so remapping your buttons, enter game settings. So if I wanted to change the dip switches or the difficulty, the lives, things like that, I can do that for each individual game, which is quite impressive. And then enter the game market. So like I said, this does have built-in Wi-Fi support. I've already connected it to my Wi-Fi network. It brings up their quote-unquote game store. So all these games are free to download. Obviously you shouldn't download any games that you don't already own, but it's very simple. You can search by individual name, type it up, or you can search a couple of these pre-made categories. So say we wanted to see what Mario games are available on their marketplace. Well, here we go. We got Mario 64, Super Mario Brothers, regular Super Mario Brothers. Tells you the system, gives you a little bit of a preview there with the picture, and then you would simply click on it. If you want to install it onto your SD card, you would just hit install and it will download the game, and then once it is downloaded, you can change it over and it'll say, do you want to play? Or you can also find the downloaded games at the bottom of the game listing on your main menu. And I'll bring it up. I've definitely seen some interesting name variations. This is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 for the PlayStation 1. It is officially titled Thank You Hawk Professional Skateboarder. That is the title, so definitely some language barrier issues. I downloaded Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 for the Nintendo 64. It runs perfectly well, but the game button configuration didn't work. Like, all I could do was steer and ride around. I couldn't actually jump, ollie, perform any tricks because it wasn't recognizing the action buttons. So that was kind of a weird little hiccup. Like I said, the game performs well, it just wasn't playing with the button layout. So hadn't figured out a way to customize that downloaded game and the button layout quite yet, but let's go ahead and check out some performance of the gameplay overall. Battletoads for the Super Nintendo. Obviously no issues running Super Nintendo games since it's powerful enough to run things like Dreamcast and PSP and Nintendo 64. Or Mortal Kombat 4 for the PlayStation 1. This is definitely my least favorite Mortal Kombat game. Oh, it got me. No slowdown issues though, it's definitely running full speed. Start out with a little Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Marvel vs. Capcom.
As you can see, the analog stick's working well. Check out some PSP emulation. Let's do a little Bucky O'Hare arcade action. Game is playing great. All right, so let's do pros and cons of this wonderful little device. So pro, it's affordable, $80. You get 3,000 built-in games, which is really kind of impressive. Especially, that's kind of where Pandora's box type stuff really excels at. If you're one of those type of people that don't have a, collection of ROMs, or you don't really want to mess with the hassle of setting up your own individual images and things like that, this is where things like this really come in handy, because it's literally just turn on and enjoy it. You don't have to do a lot of extra behind the scenes work to get everything configured and up and running. It's got lots of customization options in case you want to change your difficulty settings, your lives, things like that, personalization on the individual games. Build quality is something I think this unit kind of suffers on. It's just a cheap plastic case and shell, which again, for $80 I completely understand, but I do hear some rattling around, which is slightly concerning, which means something inside internally is not fastened securely, so that's a bit of a concern. Pocketability, portability is excellent. I mean, you could legitimately place this in your pocket. It's such a sleek, thin, narrow design. One thing I didn't enjoy though is these buttons. While the D-pad and the analog stick are more than adequate in my opinion, the buttons are a little bit lackluster, especially how low profile they are. I wish they could add some different buttons to this unit that maybe stuck out a little more, just because my finger slides off these so easily, just because they're so thin and close to the front bezel of this device. Sound quality was decent, even though it's one speaker. You are going to hear some crackling, things like that when you have the volume up super high, but the fact that we've got that 3.5 millimeter headphone jack out is very impressive, because we can play this on the go, on a bus, on a plane, and not bother everybody with the loud noise of this, while you're throwing Hadoukens and fireballs across the screen. All the games I've tested played exceptionally well. Like I said, I did see some stuttering every once in a while and some frame drops on some PlayStation 1 and PlayStation Portable titles, but definitely nothing that is concerning or going to ruin your gameplay. The download store, I think that's kind of cool. The ability to go out there and download and add some extra games to your hardware and to this device, because one thing I noticed, it was missing all the Metal Slug games. So that's the first thing I wanted to test out and download was Metal Slug, because it's a fantastic game. Plus, it's a really good indicator of emulation performance, because there's a lot of things going on screen. But overall, I think this is definitely worth the price of admission. If you want to pick one up, I'll have product links down in the video description box below. And that does it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. Share this video with your friends if you found the information helpful. And as always, thanks for watching, guys. It really means a lot.